They say peace is the hardest thing to hold on to, not because it slips through your fingers, but because the moment you start to believe you deserve it, that's when life likes to remind you just how breakable it really is. Name's Jack Malone, Delta Force, retired, if that's even a thing. I swapped deserts for cul-de-sacs, rifles for rakes, war zones for the sleepy streets of Palm Creek. For the first time in decades, I could hear birds louder than my own pulse, and I thought I'd finally build a life for my son Ethan that didn't involve looking over his shoulder. Of course, I was dead wrong about that. Peace doesn't disappear quietly. It cracks, sometimes all at once. It was one of those sunsets you only get near the ocean, everything dipped in gold, jasmine on the breeze, made you believe for a second that nothing could go wrong. Ethan, 24, sharp as a tack, was out by the curb tinkering with his drone, asking if I thought he could strap a camera on it and sell footage to realtors. I remember laughing, grease on my hands, telling him he'd have to survive the HOA first. Around here, those 3 letters, HOA, carry more weight than most people realize. They decide if your grass is too high, your shutter's the wrong shade of blue, your life a little too different. Most people just grumble, pay the fines, keep their heads down. I didn't really care. After what I'd seen, I wasn't about to go to war over mailboxes and hedge heights. Our place wasn't much, flag on the porch, not for show, but for memory. Every evening, I'd fix something just to keep my hands busy. Old soldiers, you know, we hate idle moments. Idle is when the ghosts get in. I told Ethan that once, and he just smirked. Maybe ghosts only show up when you stop living, Dad. He was right, of course. Palm Creek was the kind of place trouble seemed impossible. Families waving, kids on bikes, retirees watering their lawns. That's why I chose it. I wanted to show Ethan what normal looked like, even if I never quite understood it myself. But that night, as the shadows stretched longer, a crow called in the distance, and something inside me tensed, a tremor I hadn't felt since Afghanistan. Instinct doesn't die. It just waits for a reason. Then the air changed. The usual neighborhood sounds, kids laughing, sprinklers ticking, just stopped. I looked up and saw the taller one barked at Ethan. You can't skateboard here. HOA rules. Ethan told him he lived here, pointed at our house. The other guy stepped closer, hammer on his belt, not a citation pad. Don't lie to me, kid. You're trespassing. His voice wasn't law, it was threat. And then, old adrenaline, that cold, mechanical calm, hit me hard. Ethan flinched as the thug grabbed his wrist. There was a sickening crack, Ethan's face twisting with pain as he dropped to his knees, clutching his hand. The kind of sound you don't forget. That was it. Instinct took over, and before I knew it, I had my sidearm drawn. Let him go, I growled, using a tone I hadn't pulled out since the war. They hesitated, but one twitched for his vest. Bad idea. I fired a warning shot, took a chunk out of their SUV. Suddenly, the neighborhood was awake. Doors flying open, cell phones out, orders shattered by chaos. Ethan was bleeding, tears and shock and confusion on his face. The shorter thug spat. You just assaulted HOA officers. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. You're not officers. You're not even men. The taller one started to back away, but I blocked his path, caught the fear in his eyes. He flashed a fake badge, laminated, no barcode, just a lie. I barely had time to call him out before the real cops screeched up. Red and blue washed over everything. I dropped my weapon. Hands up, explained everything. Ethan got rushed to the hospital, hand mangled, and I watched as the illusion of peace dissolved into blood and sirens. Hospitals always smell like endings, bleach and fear. Ethan's room was cold, the doctors talking about fractures and nerve damage. I sat beside him, staring at the bandages, the monitors, the rhythm that said he was still fighting. Sheriff Reed showed up, silver hair, jaw set, eyes like steel. He listened to my story, then pulled out 2 official HOA badges from an evidence bag, said the county records showed those men were legal enforcers, at least on paper. So you're saying they're real? I asked. He just shrugged. Paper can pretend to be the truth. Turns out, the whole enforcement division was created 3 months back, with a rubber-stamped file and a few signatures. That was the first twist. The system wasn't broken, it was rigged. These guys weren't just bullies, they were the tip of something deeper, meaner. I walked home that night past the spot where Ethan's blood still stained the curb, feeling like I was living in someone else's nightmare. Inside the mailbox was a folded note. Property violation. You will comply or be fined. Palm Creek HOA enforcement. We don't forget. Red ink smeared at the bottom, just to make it personal. Ethan's hand would take months to heal. Maybe longer. The neighbors kept their distance, casseroles and sympathy at the door, but something in the air had shifted. I started noticing the same black SUV parked too long at the end of our street. Paranoia, maybe, or maybe not. Ethan caught me staring out the blinds. You think they'll come back? He asked. I shrugged. People like that never really leave. He just nodded. Stubborn as ever. That night, we went through the security footage, tracing logos and faces. Marston Property Group. The name kept popping up. Old contacts from my Delta days dug deeper. Marston was a shell, used to buy foreclosed homes, push out holdouts, make way for redevelopment. And the HOA wasn't just about rules. It was about control. Fear was the tool, violence the hammer. One night, Ethan showed me a map, same SUVs, same enforcers, popping up in neighborhoods all across the county. You always said know your enemy, he reminded me. So we worked, matching faces, following money, digging until every shell company led back to Marston, and one step further, to something called the Palmer Initiative. That's when Miles Rohr, my old spotter from overseas, reappeared, now running a repair shop, but with enough surveillance gear in the back to arm a small army. Marston isn't real estate, he said. It's a front. Palmer Initiative, urban pacification. Rebranded for the suburbs. He handed me a flash drive, enough evidence to make anyone dangerous. But there was rot closer to home. Sheriff Reed. His name was buried in Marston's shell network. Not direct, but money trails, donations, the kind of stuff you only see if you're trained to look. I confronted him, laid out the evidence. You think I have a choice? He hissed. You ever seen what Marston does to people who say no? For a moment, we were just two men who'd seen too much, but I laid my gun on his desk. No more warnings. You're helping me stop them. With Reed's access, Ethan's hacking, and Miles's backup, we hit Marston's main compound before dawn. It wasn't just an office, it was a fortress. Cameras, patrols, a data vault lined with screens tracking every neighborhood, every person, every act of defiance color-coded by risk. It wasn't compliance. They were running behavioral experiments, using entire communities as test grounds. When the alarms finally sounded, it was like we're all over again. Shots fired, thermite burning servers, escaped by the skin of our teeth. We barely made it out, clutching the files, proof of everything, bribes, threats, surveillance orders, plans to scale the whole thing nationwide. And then, as we ran, Miles stayed behind, rifle blazing, to cover us. He bought us our escape, one last favor in a lifetime of debts. We sent the files to every news outlet, law office, and watchdog we could. 3 days later, the story broke. Marston, Palmer Initiative, the whole network exposed. Congressional hearings, resignations, lawsuits, justice, or something like it. Palm Creek started healing. The board stepped down, neighbors stepped up, fences came down, kids played outside again. Ethan's hand healed slow, but his spirit never broke. He built a digital archive, the neighborhood files, so nobody would forget. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear that hammer in my head, but now it reminds me what we're fighting for. Sheriff Reed took early retirement, moved north. Before he left, he nodded at the new sign on my fence, protected by Delta Force veteran. Warning, he asked. Promise, I said. So, is it over? Maybe for now. But peace doesn't keep itself. It needs watchmen. That's the real oath. And as long as there's another kid out there who just wants to build something instead of breaking, I'll be right here, standing guard, doing what I was trained for, making sure no badge, no lie, no threat ever cracks this street again. Now, I want to know, what would you have done? Where do you draw the line between following rules and fighting for what's right? Drop your story in the comments. Because out here, justice doesn't happen by accident. It happens when good people decide enough is enough.